Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where comfort doesn't exist. No phone light, no blanket hum, not even a reliable spark to call your own. You're standing in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, sometime around 1831, and the cold bites deeper than any alarm clock ever could. The only sound is the soft hiss of snow against pine bark, and your breath curling out in little ghosts of steam. Somewhere, miles ahead, a man named Bill waits, one of the last real mountain men, the kind of person who could light a fire with nothing but his willpower and a handful of wet twigs. You're about to learn from him, but first, you have to survive the night. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always wild seeing where people are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through snow that feels like powdered glass, every crunch echoing through the pines. The air is thin enough to sting. Your fingers, wrapped in damp wool, are useless lumps of ice. Bill told you this morning, fire's life. Lose it, and you're done. You didn't realize how literal that was until now. You crouch by a fallen log and fumble through your pouch. Inside a small piece of steel, a shard of flint, and a square of charcloth that smells faintly like burnt linen. Bill showed you once, casually, as if the trick were no harder than striking a match. You, however, are shaking so hard that the steel keeps slipping. Sparks leap, then vanish. Again, nothing. You mutter under your breath, the kind of half prayer, half curse that every frontiersman eventually learns. Historians still argue whether these early trappers relied more on skill or sheer superstition, but out here, both seem necessary. You remember Bill's voice. The trick ain't the spark, boy, it's catching it. You steady your breath, angle the steel, and this time, a spark lands right on the charcloth. It glows faint as a dying ember. You lean close, gently, blowing until your face feels the warmth. The ember crawls outward, then blooms into a lick of orange. A little bundle of tender, dry pine needles, shredded bark, and a twist of moss catches. And for the first time in hours, you have a flame. You feel absurdly powerful. You alone have pulled light from nothing. Bill says fire was the mountain man's first tool and last comfort. When the snow soaked every stick, he de-dried them in his coat or split logs with his knife to find the dry heartwood inside. Some men carried a secret stash of resin or powdered fungus that would take a spark even when soaked. Others used what they called punkwood, half-rotted and crumbly, but perfect for catching embers. Your little fire sputters, then steadies, and suddenly the forest looks different, less endless, less cruel. The orange light licks across the snow and catches in the black hollows of the trees. Somewhere beyond that light, a coyote yips, curious, maybe annoyed that you dared disturb the night. Bill once told you that real frontiersmen could read fire the way a scholar reads books. The color, the crackle, the way smoke curls. Each sign said something. Blue flame means clean burn, good air, thick smoke, wet wood or bad fuel. Sparks popping high. Resin-rich pine, dangerous if near dry leaves. These were details civilization forgot the moment it invented stoves. You remember how Bill, during your first night in camp, built a banked fire, burying live coals under a mound of ash to keep them smoldering through the night. In the morning, he'd uncover them, and they'd glow like the heart of the earth itself. You tried once, failed, and woke to frost clinging to your beard and dead ashes mocking you. He just laughed, spat tobacco into the snow, and said, "You'll get it when you need it. Tonight you needed it." You pile on a bit of pine, careful not to smother the flames. You feel the warmth creep back into your bones. The wind moans through the valley like some distant ghost. The reality of this life starts to sink in, that every small comfort here must be earned, scraped, coaxed, or fought for. Historians often romanticize the mountain men, those solitary figures with beards, like tangled moss and rifles, longer than their patience. But the truth is less glamorous. Fire wasn't just warmth, it was light, defense, and companionship. Some men talked to it. They said it was the only thing that ever answered back. You think of that now, watching the flames dance. Maybe it's the heat getting to your head, but you almost feel the fire breathing with you, a steady rhythm, slow and alive. There's a smell drifting in from somewhere, faintly sweet, like pine pitch and burnt leather. You realize your gloves are a little too close to the coals. You yank them back, grinning. Bill would have called that an education through stupidity. You shift a bit of snow to form a reflector wall behind the fire, one of Bill Estrick's. It traps the heat, bouncing it back toward you instead of letting it vanish into the night. You stick a couple of green branches in an X shape to hang your wet socks near the heat, tiny luxuries, frontier style. When the fire's steady, you lean back on your bedroll and stare upward. The sky is absurdly clear, stars sharp as broken glass. You try to pick out the North Star, like Bill showed you. He said you could always trust it to tell you where home isn't. You smile at that, half asleep, half awake. The fire pops softly. Somewhere an owl calls. You realize, slowly, that this quiet crackle, this circle of warmth in the middle of nowhere, is the oldest human comfort in existence. Before homes, before kings, before nations, there was fire and night. And you've just joined that lineage. As the flames lower to glowing coals, your eyelids grow heavy. You bank the embers just like Bill taught, carefully shoveling snow around the outer edges, leaving the heart intact. Tomorrow, if you're lucky, those embers will still breathe when the first pale light hits the peaks. Out here, survival doesn't reward strength, it rewards patience. And tonight, your patience has bought you another sunrise. You close your eyes, feeling the hum of the fire echo through your body. The cold can wait, the lessons can wait. For now, you've earned sleep breathing when you wake a faint red pulse under a crust of gray ash. Your back aches, your fingers are stiff, but you're alive. You sit up, brush frost from your blanket, and watch the first streaks of pink stretch across the mountains. The peaks glow like burning embers, their snowcaps blushing with sunrise. Somewhere downhill, water murmurs under a thin crust of ice, a promise of morning. Bill's already gone. Of course he is. He moves through the forest like smoke, silent, invisible, impossible to catch. He probably left before dawn, off checking traps or scouting for game. But he's left a sign for you, a small notch carved into the nearest pine. It means follow. You douse the last of the coals with snow, stir it with a stick until it hisses, and shoulder your pack. The forest smells sharp and clean, resin, cold earth, and something animal lingering faintly in the air. You move downhill, boots sinking into snow, the world muffled and quiet. Soon you find him by a stream, hunched over a patch of ground cleared of snow. He's showing you how to build a shelter, not the kind you saw in books, all neat and triangular, but a rough, improvised lean-to made from whatever the forest gives. Don't fight the weather, he says, without looking up. Hide from it. You watch as he drives to forked sticks into the frozen ground, wedges a long ridgepole between them, and drapes a skin of pine boughs over the top. It looks crude, almost laughably simple, but when he crawls inside and gestures for you to join, you feel the sudden change. The wind dulls. The cold loses its teeth. Bill grins. You want fancy. Go back east. You laugh, but inside you realize how absurdly fragile humans are. Without this patchwork of branches, the night could have taken you. Historians still argue whether these frontier shelters were acts of genius or desperation, but sitting here, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it works. He teaches you to layer pine needles thickly on the ground, to trap heat and stop your body from bleeding warmth into the soil. Then he shows you how to angle the lean-tos back toward the prevailing wind. The mountain's your wall, he says. Let her take the hit. He hands you a hide, rough, stiff, deerskin, tanned with brains, and smoked to keep the bugs away. Roof, he says simply, and you stretch it across the top, pinning it with stones. Suddenly, the thing feels almost civilized. You sit there in the dim green light, the scent of pine heavy in your nose, and feel a strange calm. Outside, the wind sighs through the trees. Inside, there's silence, warm silence. You think about how these men, these so-called mountain men, survived months like this, sometimes years, with nothing but bark, bone, and luck. The wilderness didn't forgive mistakes. A single night of laziness could mean frostbite or worse. Bill hands you a small branch. If it's raining, angle that stick like this. He demonstrates, letting runoff slide neatly off the roof. Shelter's not about staying dry. It's about staying alive long enough to get dry later. You nod, trying to memorize every motion. He tells you stories while he works about nights when the snow came so hard it buried the lean-to completely, leaving only a narrow tunnel for smoke. About the time he built a half-faced camp out of logs, big enough for a fire to reflect heat back at him like a mirror. And about the night he slept under a single buffalo hide in a windstorm that nearly carried him to Kansas. You ain't lived, he says, till the wind tries to eat you. You chuckle, half from the absurdity and half from knowing he means it. You start gathering your own materials, fumbling at first. The snow squeaks underfoot, each step heavy. Your fingers sting from cold, but soon you find a rhythm break. Pile, weave, repeat. You build your first shelter beside his, clumsy but functional. Bill inspects it, tugs one branch, nods. It'll do for tonight. Historians often describe frontier shelters as primitive architecture, but up close, they feel more like conversation between human and landscape. You're not building against nature, you're borrowing from it, politely. Later, as the day fades, Bill points at the horizon. Clouds are forming, thick and bruised looking. She's bringing snow, he says. We'll ride it out here. You help him fortify the camp, packing snow along the base of the walls, stacking branches to cut the wind. When he's satisfied, he crouches by the fire ring and starts coaxing flame again. You hand him the flint and steel. He gives you a look that says, no, your hands are steadier tonight. The spark lands, the char catches, and the tinder smokes. When the flame finally blooms, Bill grins, that rare, toothy grin. See, told you. fire listens when you stop panicking. He brews coffee in a battered tin pot, the smell cutting through the cold like a miracle. You sip from the same cup. It's bitter, smoky, and perfect. Outside, the snow begins to fall again, whisper soft. You can hear it gathering on the roof, sliding down the hides in wet sighs. Inside your little pine den, the firelight flickers against the branches, throwing amber shapes that look almost like the walls of a cabin. Almost. Bill settles back against his pack, pipe smoke curling around his head. Shelter, fire, water, food, he says quietly. That's the law of the land. Forget one, and the mountain remembers. You lie there, listening to the wind. You're no longer a visitor. You're part of this place, now stitched into its rhythm. The forest creaks, the fire murmurs, and somewhere out in the darkness, a fox barks once, sharp and distant. You pull the hide tighter around your shoulders and close your eyes, realizing something both humbling and comforting. Civilization didn't invent safety, it just borrowed it. And tonight, under a roof of pine and smoke, you've borrowed it back. The cold has a way of reminding you that nothing comes for free in the wilderness. You wake before dawn again, fingers stiff, toes numb despite the hide covering them, and the world outside your lean-to is painted in pale, trembling light. The stream gurgles faintly beneath a thin skin of ice, and somewhere nearby, the hoot of an owl fades into the morning. Survival isn't glamorous. It's repetitive, mundane, and entirely relentless. Bill is already at work, kneeling by the frozen earth. He's tapping at a patch of exposed soil near the stream, scraping at frost and snow with a flat piece of bark. You wander over, still groggy, wondering what he's up to this early. Water, he says, as if that explains everything. And in a way, it does. You can go weeks without food, but a day without water will end you. He's scraping the frost, revealing moist soil underneath, then carefully squeezing the soil through a cloth to collect water droplets. You taste it, faintly earthy, but drinkable. It's the kind of resourcefulness that turns the difference between life and death into a slow art. Historians still argue whether frontiersmen were more inventive than desperate, but sitting there with cold hands over filtered soil, you feel the answer in your veins. He shows you how to harvest morning dew, wiping it from pine needles with a scrap of cloth, wringing it into a tin cup. You chuckle because it feels ridiculous, dew as a drinkable commodity, but the taste of it, crisp and metallic in the winter air, is oddly satisfying. Next, Bill gestures toward some roots poking out from the snow. These'll keep your belly from emptying too fast. He digs carefully, revealing small, knobby tubers. You nibble one cautiously, bitter, earthy, almost chalky. He smiles, tastes like survival, huh? You watch and imitate, peeling, boiling, and chewing. It's strange, the way a man can live off what the forest offers if he knows how to ask politely. The same forest that would swallow you whole otherwise becomes a pantry if you know its quirks. Later, he leads you down to the stream proper. The water moves faster here, under sheets of ice. You watch him cut through the surface with a small knife, creating a hole just big enough to dunk a cup. Rivers, remember, he says cryptically, where fish move, where snow melts, where danger hides. You read her wrong, you'll slip and break more than pride. You follow his method, dipping your cup carefully, tasting the sharp rush of water. There's a thrill in this, a quiet satisfaction that no grocery store could ever provide. And yet, there's constant caution. One misstep, a slip, a misjudged edge of ice, and the consequences are instant. Bill then shows you an old trick with roots: peel, crush, and chew to release hidden moisture. Plants are sneaky. They're here for you if you know their secrets. But the wrong bite can make you see things you don't want to see. You nod, half smiling at the vague threat. Quirky, perhaps, but he's right. Some roots will make you vomit. He speaks about water collection with the ease of someone discussing coffee. To him, it's not labor, it's necessity. Yet you can't shake the awe of his calm. The wilderness is indifferent, sometimes hostile, and he treats it like a living teacher. You wonder if you could ever move through it with the same ease. You begin to notice subtle patterns: birds skittering toward the water at precise times, animal tracks frozen into mud, small depressions hinting at beaver dens. Reading these signs feels like learning a secret language. You remember something historians debate: whether the mountain men were students of nature or merely opportunists. But watching Bill, it's clear he's both. Every step, every observation is a lesson in survival. By midday, you resetting up a small collection system along the bank, a series of shallow troughs lined with bark to catch runoff, dew, and any condensation. You realize the process is meditative in its own way. The repetitive scraping, filling, and filtering brings a rhythm to your day, a grounding in the here and now. Later, as you boil some tubers over the fire, Bill talks about the Blackfeet, whose lands you skirt. Water means more than life. It means roots, settlements, encounters. Respect the rivers, and they'll respect you, and maybe keep others at bay. You nod, understanding that survival isn't just about physical needs, but navigating human threats as well. By evening, you carry several liters of filtered water back to the lean-to. It feels like a small victory, mundane, quiet, and essential. You fill your bottles, hang them from branches to stay clean, and sip, savoring the taste. Out here, this simple act becomes ceremonial. Your hands are red from cold. Your face stings, but there's a strange satisfaction in this slow mastery. You begin to understand why mountain men treated water collection as sacred. They weren't just gathering sustenance. They were negotiating survival with the wilderness itself. And as you lay down that night, listening to the faint trickle of the stream under ice, the snow settling like a soft quilt, you feel something subtle but profound. The wilderness gives to those who pay attention, and it withholds from those who do not. The morning light is pale and hesitant when you step out of the lean-to. Your boots sink into the half-frozen snow, leaving deep, fragile impressions. Somewhere ahead, a branch snaps under the weight of unseen wildlife, and your senses sharpen instinctively. Bill doesn't walk. He glides, careful, deliberate, like he's part of the forest itself. Today, he's teaching you to track, not just animals, he says, but everything: prey, predators, even other humans. Tracking is more subtle than you imagined. You lean down, squinting at footprints, half buried in frost. Tiny twigs are displaced in a way that tells a story: deer grazing, rabbit hopping, maybe even a wolf scenting the air. Bill kneels beside you, pointing to a faint drag line. See this? Not a paw, something heavier. Someone walked through here yesterday, maybe carrying a trap or a pack. Historians still argue whether mountain men relied more on intuition than observation. But trust me, both saved lives. You crouch lower, brushing away snow, and suddenly the earth feels alive. Broken needles, bent grasses, and half-hidden pebbles speak in a language you've never known. A large bird flies overhead, its shadow skimming the ground. You learn to read the sky as well, the angle of the sun, cloud formations. Even the flight path of birds can hint at where animals congregate or where a storm might strike. Bill demonstrates how to read tracks for size, weight, and pace. He makes a small mark in the snow to indicate the direction a deer has taken. You mimic him, noting the subtle sway in the hooves, the way the snow compresses differently under each step. It's exhausting, every muscle alert, every sense awake, but thrilling. You begin to understand why frontiersmen considered this skill essential. A misread track could mean a lost meal, or worse, a sudden encounter with a predator. Later, Bill shows you a trick with broken twigs. If they snap in one direction, it might indicate recent movement. If crushed evenly, older, he winks. You'll start seeing the forest move without moving your eyes. It's creepy the first time. You chuckle, thinking how absurd that sounds, until a fox dashes past, and you realize he's right. The world is constantly in motion. You just have to notice. Next comes the lesson in human tracking. Bill gestures to footprints, partially obscured by snow. Native paths, trappers, traders, everyone leaves marks. Learn them, or someone might be learning you. You examine the prints, noticing subtle differences, boot size, stride length, heel wear. Even the occasional mud smear tells a story. The Blackfeet and other tribes travel lightly, silently, and mountain men had to anticipate encounters to survive. Your first attempts feel clumsy. You miss details, step on hidden twigs, and lose the faint trail. Bill doesn't scold. Instead, he points out what you missed: the snow compression, the orientation of a fallen leaf, the barely there indentation in a moss patch. Each mistake is a lesson, each correction a revelation. Tracking is patience, observation, and humility. By afternoon, you follow a trail that leads to a small stream. Here, tracks converge: rabbit, deer, and possibly a bear. Bill teaches you how to anticipate where animals drink, feed, and rest. You practice moving silently, watching for movement in the brush, adjusting to shadows, and noting smells carried on the wind. Every sense is engaged. Historians debate how much these methods were shared or taught, but the evidence in footprints and memory suggests a long tradition of empirical learning. Then, the forest offers a lesson in subtlety. A deer has left fresh tracks near a ridge. You freeze, heart pounding. Bill whispers to you about patience, how standing still and letting nature resume its rhythm often brings the prize. You crouch for what feels like hours, until a flash of brown fur appears. Your breath is shallow, your hands tense. Tracking isn't hunting, it's a dialogue, a negotiation with instinct and chance. By the end of the day, your legs ache, your back complains, and your mind feels stretched thin. Yet, there's a profound satisfaction in understanding patterns invisible to the untrained eye. You notice the way water drips off rocks, the angles of fallen branches, the subtle impressions of animal trails. Every movement tells a story. As night falls, Bill sits by the lean-to, sharpening a small knife. You reflect on the day, how every broken twig, every trace in snow could have been a missed signal or a fatal mistake, but you survived. You've learned to read a forest that seems to whisper secrets. You realize the wilderness is not just a place to endure, it's a place that teaches. And tonight, as you bank the fire, listening to the whisper of wind through pines and the distant rumble of mountain streams. You feel the thrill of being seen by the forest, acknowledged in its cryptic, ancient language. By the next morning, the cold seems less like an enemy and more like a teacher. You wake with the sun low on the horizon, brushing pale light across the snow. Your fingers are still stiff, but the numbness has faded enough to allow movement. Today, Bill plans to introduce you to the heart of the frontier economy, the beaver trap. It's one thing to survive. It's another to feed the fire and buy your freedom with pelts. You follow him down a slope to a slow-moving river, water partially frozen, edged with ice that creaks underfoot. Bill kneels, pulling from his pack a small iron trap, its steel jaws gleaming despite weeks in his care. This, he says, holding it up like a sacred artifact, is more than metal. It's survival, trust, and patience, all in one. You nod, awed at the simplicity and weight of it. Historians still argue whether trapping was an art passed down orally or invented in isolation. But watching him, you see a combination of both, experience refined into method. Bill digs a small trench beside a beaver slide, the narrow path where creatures enter and leave the river. You bait it, he says, showing a small glob of castor gland mixed with whiskey and crushed spices. The smell is pungent, earthy, almost intoxicating. You wrinkle your nose. This, he laughs, is like perfume for beavers. They probably wouldn't survive a fancy candle. Quirky, sure, but effective. He demonstrates setting the trap underwater, pressing it so the spring is taut, then covering it lightly with mud and sticks so it blends seamlessly with the riverbed. Your first attempt feels clumsy, hands slipping, fingers numbed by water that refuses to warm. But Bill watches patiently, correcting angles and pressure. You start to understand that trapping isn't just placement, it's psychology. Anticipate the animal, respect its cunning, and give yourself an edge. Next comes the lesson in sheltering your catch. Bill builds a quick wiki up near the riverbank, a small dome of bent saplings and pine boughs. Beavers, he says, are smart, and we're not just hunting for food. We're hunting for warmth, trade, and sometimes even leverage. Keep your pelts dry, keep your spirits dry. You watch as he stretches hides across the frame, demonstrating proper skinning techniques with a practiced hand. The motion is almost surgical. Cut, scrape, stretch. One false slice, and you could ruin a pelt worth weeks of food and trade. He hands you a beaver tail to study, showing how the castor glands can be removed without ruining the fur. You marvel at the ingenuity. The same gland that marks territory can lure a trapper's fortune. The tactile sensation of the fur is astonishing, thick, water-resistant, almost luxurious in contrast to your numb fingers. Some scholars debate whether mountain men prized pelts for necessity or fashion, but you feel both importance and beauty in this simple animal. Later, he demonstrates skinning techniques. First, remove the limbs and tail cleanly, then make a careful incision along the belly. Fleshing comes next, scraping fat and tissue from the skin side without tearing. Your hands are awkward at first, but Bill's corrections are gentle, almost encouraging. Patience, he says, is what separates a hunter from a butcher. We're neither. We're survivors. After the pelt is cleaned, he shows you how to stretch it over a simple frame to dry. Sun, wind, and patience, he explains. Nature does most of the work. You just guide it. The process takes hours, but as you watch the beaver transform from animal to resource, you feel an odd pride. This is skill, history, and necessity, all rolled into one. You can't help but notice the rhythm of the river. 2. How water flow, temperature, and ice patterns reveal animal movement. Tracking and trapping merge seamlessly here. The forest, river, and snow all form a living classroom. Quirky little facts pop up. Beavers sometimes chew trees near the river to redirect water. A well-set trap here might need no attention for days. By evening, you sit in your small wiki up, the river murmuring, the first star winking in the sky. The beaver pelts are safe, the trap set, and the fire low but warm. Bill sits beside you, pipe glowing, and for a moment there's silence. Not lonely silence, but the kind that feels like survival itself. You realize the frontier isn't just about enduring the cold or hunger. It's about understanding life and death in a way no city could teach. He leans back, gesturing at the river. Tomorrow we'll make more than shelter and trap. We'll make food that lasts. But tonight, remember this, the river talks. You listen, or you go hungry, and you do. You sit, listening to the water, thinking about the delicate balance of this life, and feeling strangely, quietly competent. The wilderness has begun to speak to you, and you, at last, can answer. The morning is crisp and biting, frost etched like delicate lace across the pine needles. You awaken to the faint smell of smoke and pine resin curling through the lean-to. Bill is already on his knees by the fire, flint and steel in hand, coaxing sparks that bloom into a small, reliable flame. Today, he promises, you'll learn the art of buckskin, not just clothing, but armor against cold, wind, and the relentless wilderness. He pulls a freshly tanned deer hide from his pack, thick yet pliable. Brains and smoke, he says, tapping it with pride. Brains for the tanning, smoke for the scent, durability, and a little respect. Historians still argue whether this method was superior to water tanning, but out here, it doesn't matter. It works. You run your hands over the hide, rough but promising, alive with the promise of warmth. First lesson, softening. Bill shows you how to knead and fold the hide, working out stiffness while keeping it supple. Think of it as massage, he jokes, for a deer that can't complain. You mimic his movements, feeling the hide loosen, fibers relaxing under patient pressure. Quirky, maybe, but oddly soothing. The repetitive motion becomes almost meditative. Then comes cutting. Bill lays the hide on the snow, marking the pattern of a simple jacket with a stick. You learn to measure by body parts, folding the hide and using folds as guides. Every inch must account for movement, layering, and the thickness of the winter undergarments you'll wear beneath it. A miscut here, and the jacket could become useless, stiff, or restrictive. Sewing follows. Bill demonstrates using sinew pulled from deer tendons, twisted to create a strong, natural thread. The needle is bone, sharp, and flexible, and you spend long minutes pushing it through the hide, knotting, stretching, and tightening. The process is slow, deliberate. Every stitch counts. You start to understand why these jackets could last years, resisting wind, water, and wear. While you work, Bill chats about style and function. Fringe along sleeves, he explains, isn't decorative. It channels rainwater away from the body. A hood, once considered excessive by city folk, keeps frostbite at bay. Even the placement of pockets reflects knowledge of movement and survival priorities. You chuckle at the thought of fashion magazines failing to capture this level of genius. He then demonstrates smoking the hide over a small, smoky fire to cure it further, infusing scent, strength, and resistance into the fabric. The smell is pungent, sharp, and oddly comforting. Every jacket tells a story, Bill says, eyes glinting. Who wore it? What survived and what didn't? Quirky, maybe, but meaningful. You feel a strange connection to the countless hunters, trappers, and mountain men who perfected this skill. Later, you sit by the river, working on small accessories, gloves, moccasins, and a belt. Bill shows you how to carve and lash small leather cords to keep them snug. The sun catches in the river, glinting off ice crystals like diamonds. You notice tracks again, deer rabbit, and a faint human footprint, a reminder that life, both animal and human, pulses all around you. By afternoon, your jacket is functional, if slightly uneven. Bill inspects it, nods, and hands you a sinew-tied pouch. You're learning, he says. Not fast, but steady. That's what matters. You practice layering and adjusting the hide, feeling warmth creep through your frozen core. The tactile sensation, the careful stitching, the smoke-scented leather, it all combines into a quiet triumph. Survival isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's patience, attention, and respect for materials that seem ordinary but are extraordinary when used correctly. As the sun dips toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the river, you look at your creation, a jacket born from knowledge, necessity, and trial. You understand the wisdom of the frontiersmen. Clothing is more than protection. It's a declaration, a statement of preparation and survival. Bill sits beside you, pipe glowing faintly, the river murmuring in accompaniment. Keep it dry, keep it clean, and it'll keep you alive. He pauses, glancing at the forest. Every stitch, every fold, every mark matters out here. Never forget that. You nod, feeling the weight of the jacket and the knowledge embedded in it. Outside, the wind picks up, but inside your hide, the cold seems distant, almost irrelevant. The wilderness is still relentless, but tonight you are prepared. And for the first time, you feel the quiet confidence of someone who can meet it, stitch by stitch, step by step. The river is louder today, swollen from snowmelt and early spring runoff. You watch the current swirl around chunks of ice, its surface rippling with power and hidden peril. Bill squints at it like a chess player evaluating moves. Today, he says, you'll cross bullboat style, the small, round craft made from willow frames and stretched deer hide is your lifeline across this torrent. He lays out the frame first, saplings bent into circles, lashed with cordage, the base lined with thick, treated hide. You help pull and stretch, feeling the hide tighten under your hands. Think of it as a floating pie crust, he jokes. You grin, imagining a pie bobbing down a river. But the humor masks the serious lesson beneath. Buoyancy and balance will dictate survival. Historians still argue whether bullboats were primarily native innovations or adapted by trappers. But as you crouch over this floating vessel, you realize it doesn't matter. It works. Bill demonstrates balance, kneeling in the small boat, using a single paddle to guide it downstream. You don't fight the river, he warns. You work with it. One wrong tilt, and your fish food, or worse, your gear, is. He gestures toward a bundle of traps and pelts secured for the crossing. Your stomach twists at the thought. Losing months of work to a single slip feels like a nightmare, but survival is a game of calculated risks. Your first attempt is awkward. Kneeling, you dip the paddle, the bullboat swaying, ice chunks bumping along its edge. The current tugs at you faster than you expect. Water splashes over the hide, soaking the bottom of your pants. Bill shouts, tips, weight distribution, paddle angle, rhythm, and gradually you find a small balance. Each stroke becomes smoother, each sway less alarming. Midway, the river pulls harder. You shift instinctively, leaning into the current, heart hammering. You recall an old, quirky fact Bill mentioned yesterday. Early trappers sometimes used empty whiskey barrels as floating supports when crossings were dangerous. You laugh to yourself. It seems absurd, but out here, absurdity is survival. When you finally reach the far bank, dripping and exhilarated, Bill pats your back. Not elegant, he says, grinning, but you're alive. That's the point. You haul the pelts and traps onto shore, every step cautious over slick rocks and mud. You notice the slight dampness already threatening your winter cache and make a mental note to improve future crossings. Later, Bill teaches you a dry land skill born from necessity, deadfall traps. Some of your iron traps were lost during the river crossing, swept downstream by an unseen current. Improvisation is required. Logs, stones, and clever leverage create the primitive yet effective contraptions. You work side by side, balancing heavy timber over rocks, testing triggers with small sticks. It's a satisfying, almost meditative exercise. By sunset, you've set several deadfalls along game trails, each carefully camouflaged. Your body aches, soaked clothes cling, but there's pride in your work. Even without iron, survival remains possible. You watch a small rabbit hop nearby, oblivious to your creations, and wonder how many lives have been shaped, saved, or taken by ingenuity alone. That night, you sit beside the fire, warming wet fingers, sharing a small meal with Bill. You talk about balance, of water, of risk, of preparation. He reminds you that wilderness teaches humility. No skill, no pelt, no plan guarantees success, but each lesson stacks, increasing the odds ever so slightly. The bullboat, the lost traps, the deadfalls, all are testaments to human adaptability in a world indifferent to your comfort. Lying in your lean-to that night, listening to the river roar beneath ice, you feel small, yet capable. The wilderness is vast, dangerous, and often absurd, but you're beginning to understand its rhythms, its challenges, and its gifts. The balance is delicate. One misstep could undo months of preparation, but mastery grows slowly, quietly, in moments just like this. And somewhere, in the soft crackle of your fire and the hush of night, you realize survival isn't just a skill. It's a conversation with rivers, forests, and yourself. And tonight, for the first time, you feel you can speak fluently. The morning air is thick with mist, curling around the trees like a slow-moving ghost. You step out of the lean-to, still damp from yesterday's river crossing, and notice Bill already moving along the ridge. Today, the focus shifts from water to shelter and traps to essentials for wintering in the wilderness. You follow him to a clearing where he begins laying out logs, branches, and pine boughs. Half-faced camp today, he says, voice low and casual, bigger, stronger, and better for long stays. You'll learn to work with what the forest gives, not what you wish it did. You watch as he leans, balances, and interlocks timber, creating a semi-permanent structure that seems to grow out of the earth itself. He shows you the lean-to first, a smaller structure, simple yet effective. You practice building your own, bending saplings and layering pine boughs. Every choice has a reason. Angle for wind deflection, thickness for insulation, positioning near water but above flood lines. You realize the forest has a logic. The mountain men simply learn to read it. Historians still argue whether these methods were passed down orally or discovered independently, but here they feel ancient and natural. Then comes the deadfall lesson, an improvisation born of necessity. With iron traps lost to the river, you need a replacement. Bill demonstrates the mechanics, a heavy log poised on a trigger stick, carefully balanced over a baited area. You test your own creation, laughing nervously as the log thuds down harmlessly on pine needles. Quirky, you think that a simple log and some ingenuity can replace expensive iron, yet it works. Setting multiple deadfalls along animal trails becomes a rhythm. You observe deer tracks, rabbit trails, and even the faint marks of coyotes. Each trap is a puzzle, a miniature negotiation with the forest. Placement, weight, and bait must all be perfect. A misjudgment, and you'll have wasted hours of work. Yet, with every success, your confidence grows. Bill talks while you work. The forest rewards observation. You think like the prey, move like the predator, respect the land, and it'll feed you. You nod, realizing this advice extends beyond trapping. It's a philosophy of life in the wild. Quirky fact, early trappers sometimes used crushed beaver glands as a scent trail to lure other animals into deadfalls. Strange, pungent, and oddly effective. By afternoon, your half-faced camp takes shape, sturdy and surprisingly comfortable. The walls deflect wind, the roof sheds water, and a small fire pit warms the interior. You place collected pine boughs for bedding, adding a layer of insulation against the snow-cold ground. Even in this modest structure, there's a profound sense of achievement, a home crafted from raw wilderness, functional and resilient. Later, Bill demonstrates how to monitor traps without disturbing them. Quiet observation beats brute force, he explains. He crouches near a trap, watching for animal movement, interpreting subtle shifts in the environment. You mimic him, the forest alive with potential, teaching you patience, humility, and timing. As dusk falls, you sit by your newly built camp, fire crackling gently, reflecting on the day. Your hands are scratched, your boots muddy, but your mind feels sharp. Each shelter, each trap, each observation has taught something new about survival, about understanding nature's patterns, and about improvising when tools fail. And as night envelops the clearing, you curl beneath the pine boughs, warmed by the fire's residual heat and the satisfaction of work well done. The wilderness is vast, silent, and indifferent. Yet here, you've carved a small, functioning space, a testament to patience, skill, and quiet ingenuity. You drift to sleep, heart still thrumming with the day's accomplishments, and feel a connection to the countless mountain men who tread these paths long before you. The morning fog clings stubbornly to the river, turning familiar shapes into ghostly silhouettes. You shake off sleep, stretching stiff muscles, and notice Bill already preparing the fire. Today's lesson is one of pure necessity, mastering fire-making, the cornerstone of every frontier survival skill. Without it, warmth, cooked food, and even mental stability vanish into the cold. Bill sits cross-legged, pulling from his pouch a small bundle, flint, steel, and charcloth. Fire is patience in tangible form, he says, eyes glinting. Historians still argue whether mountain men relied more on luck or technique, but out here, you'll learn it's 80% skill, 20% patience. You fumble with the flint at first, sparks sputtering uselessly into the snow. The steel strikes hard, but the tiny embers vanish before you can nurture them. He demonstrates the technique: precise angles, firm pressure, and the right moment to catch the spark with char cloth. The cloth itself is a lesson in resourcefulness, old linen treated to smolder without flame, ready to receive even the faintest spark. You hold your breath as a small ember catches, glowing faintly in the pale light. It's magical and terrifying at the same time. Once the ember takes, Bill shows how to nurture it with fine tinder. You gather dried grasses, pine needles, and birch bark, layering carefully around the ember, feeding it slowly while shielding it from wind. The first flame sputters, falters, then roars to life, licking at your fingers and warming your soul. You grin, a mixture of relief and triumph washing over you. Bill chuckles. Wet days will test you more than this. Snow, rain, or wind, and your fire has to survive. Mountain men learned to bank coals overnight, cover them with ash, and rekindle the next morning. He demonstrates, burying a small coal under ash, carefully reconstructing it the next day. Quirky, maybe, but ingenious. You practice again, sparks flying, patience tested. Each success reinforces the rhythm of the wilderness: observation, adjustment, repetition. Fire is survival, but it's also control in a world that offers little. You realize how much trust is involved, trusting your hands, your materials, and your knowledge. Then comes cooking. Bill shows you how to prepare small meals with the fire, from drying meat strips to simmering water for pemmican. Flames crackle, smoke curls, and the aroma fills the clearing. You cut meat into thin strips, rendering fat to mix with dried berries. The process is methodical, almost meditative. Quirky historical tidbit: some trappers added wild onions or herbs found along streams to pemmican for flavor, a small luxury that boosted morale. You reflect on the connection between fire and community. A fire sustains life, signals presence, and deters predators. Alone, it is a shield against nature's indifference. With others, it becomes a gathering point, a place for storytelling, negotiation, and camaraderie. You feel the lineage of mountain men in every spark, every flare, every small success. By dusk, the fire burns steadily. You've practiced flint and steel, banked coals, cooked food, and even improvised with damp wood. Your hands are blackened, fingers raw, but your mind is alive with confidence. Mastering fire has shifted the balance subtly, no longer entirely at the mercy of the cold. You carry warmth in your hands, life in your control. As the night deepens, you sit beside the crackling flames, watching sparks rise into the starry sky. The wind whispers, the river murmurs, and for a moment, you feel connected to a vast tradition of survival, ingenuity, and quiet resilience. Fire is more than warmth. It's knowledge, experience, and the heartbeat of the frontier. The first light of dawn filters through the trees, painting frost-covered branches in soft gold. Today, Bill has another crucial lesson lined up: pemmican, the high-energy survival food that could mean life or death in the mountains. You've observed it before, smelled it, and even tasted scraps. But now it's time to make it yourself. From hunting to final preparation, you follow him to a small clearing where a freshly hunted deer lies, field-dressed and ready. Every ounce counts, Bill says, gesturing to the carcass. Historians still argue whether pemmican was more for long-term sustenance or for trade. But either way, it kept mountain men alive. You nod, feeling the weight of responsibility. The food you prepared today could sustain weeks of solitary travel, or it could spoil if mishandled. First step is slicing the meat into thin strips. Bill demonstrates the technique, cutting against the grain to maximize tenderness and speed drying. The thin slices dry faster over the fire or on racks of pine, and moisture is the enemy here. You mimic his movements, fingers numb from cold but steady. The smell of warm, drying meat is oddly comforting, a primal signal of survival. Next comes rendering fat. Bill places chunks in a small iron pot over the fire, slowly melting them into liquid gold. Fat is energy, he says, eyes on the simmering liquid. Without it, you can eat all the meat you want, but you'll still starve in these mountains. You stir carefully, noting the thick aroma, thinking how strange it is that a few simple ingredients could sustain life in such harsh conditions. When the meat is dried and the fat rendered, it's time to combine them. Berries collected along the river are added for flavor and nutrition. Cranberries, chokecherries, and a few wild blueberries. The mixture is kneaded together into dense cakes, packed into cloth or small pouches for portability. Quirky, maybe, but ingenious, pemmican is compact, calorie-dense, and nearly indestructible if kept dry. Bill watches as you press the mixture into uniform blocks. Precision counts, he says. Too wet, and it molds. Too dry, and it crumbles. Get it right, and it's like carrying the mountains in your pack. You nod, feeling the tactile connection to survival. Every movement, every squeeze, every fold matters. He also teaches storage techniques, reminding you of the dangers of moisture, rodents, and careless handling. You learn to wrap each block carefully, tuck them above ground on branches or in hollowed logs, and monitor them periodically. In this harsh wilderness, even small mistakes can compound into disaster. By mid-afternoon, your first batch of pemmican is complete. You bite into a small piece, dense, slightly sweet from berries, oily but sustaining. The flavor is secondary to its purpose, its fuel, life condensed into a compact form. You feel pride in your work, understanding the effort that mountain men invested to carry this simple, enduring food through weeks of isolation and danger. As the sun dips behind jagged peaks, you sit by the fire, examining your finished pemmican and the drying meat racks. Bill smiles, pipe glowing faintly in the twilight. Tomorrow, we hunt again, track again, and learn more. But tonight, savor this. You made something that can keep you alive. That's not trivial. You lean back against the lean-to, tired but satisfied, listening to the distant murmur of the river. The mountains feel less intimidating now, their rhythm understood, if only in part. Every skill, fire, shelter, traps, and now pemmican forms a chain, each link essential for survival. And as night descends, you feel a quiet confidence. The frontier is harsh, but you are learning to meet it, one deliberate, patient step at a time. The sun peeks through the spruce canopy as you shoulder your pack, the air crisp with early spring chill. Today, Bill is taking you deeper into the wilderness for hands-on lessons in tracking and hunting. These are the skills that separate a novice from a mountain man. The difference between a hungry day and a full belly, between life and death. Your first task is observation. Bill crouches low, pointing to tiny impressions in the damp earth. These tracks tell stories, he whispers. Not just the animal, but when it passed, where it's headed, and whether it's alone or in a group. Historians still argue whether mountain men relied more on instinct or study, but both matter. You kneel beside him, tracing hoofprints with a stick, noting subtle disturbances in moss and leaves. The forest seems alive in ways you've never noticed. Next, he teaches you scent tracking. The wind carries subtle aromas, musk of deer, the wet fur of a passing coyote, even faint hints of beaver scent near the river. You inhale, attempting to distinguish one from another, your senses sharpening with practice. Quirky and slightly absurd, you think, to rely on smell so keenly, yet it works. The wilderness speaks, if only you learn its language. Hours pass as you follow trails, silent and deliberate. Bill shows you how to read broken twigs, bent grass, and scuffed bark. Each sign is a clue, a breadcrumb in the complex puzzle of survival. You begin to anticipate movements, predicting where an animal might pause for water or shelter. The satisfaction of correctly interpreting a trail is subtle but profound, a small triumph in a world where mistakes are costly. Then comes still hunting, the art of moving without being seen or heard. Bill demonstrates, crouching low, taking measured steps, pausing frequently. You mimic him, heart hammering, every nerve alert. The forest is dense, yet you start to sense patterns, where deer feed, where rabbits hide, and where predators might lurk. Quirky fact, early trappers sometimes imitated animal calls, or used small whistles to flush prey into traps, blending cunning with instinct. Eventually, you encounter a herd of deer grazing in a clearing. Bill whispers guidance, showing you wind direction, stance, and timing. You freeze, muscles tense, every sense heightened. The first shot misses, a humbling reminder that skill takes time. Bill shrugs. Mistakes are lessons. Don't beat yourself up. Mountain men learned patience because the forest won't forgive arrogance. After hours, you manage a successful take, small but enough to practice field dressing and preservation. Bill demonstrates how to efficiently skin and quarter the animal, using every part for food, clothing, or trade. You follow, hands trembling, but gradually confident. The smell of fresh meat and the distant cry of birds create a sensory tapestry that roots you firmly in the wild. By late afternoon, you've tracked multiple animals, set small traps, and even spotted signs of predators. Bill comments on your progress, noting that awareness and calmness are as vital as speed or strength. Out here, knowing the forest, respecting it, and listening to it is survival. You nod, feeling a growing connection, not just to the land, but to the lineage of hunters, trappers, and mountain men who honed these skills through decades of trial and error. As dusk falls, you sit by the fire with freshly rendered meat and berries, reflecting on the day. The forest, once alien and overwhelming now, feels like a partner in your survival. Unpredictable, yes, but decipherable with attention, patience, and humility. Each footprint, broken twig, and subtle scent carries knowledge. And in this quiet understanding, you realize you're learning not just to survive, but to coexist with the wilderness, even on its harshest terms. The morning light is soft, filtering through the tall pines in golden beams that dance across frost-laden branches. Today, Bill has promised to take the lessons beyond animals, beyond meat and hides, and into the intricate world of human tracking and diplomacy. The frontier is as much about people as it is about wilderness, and understanding human presence can be as critical as knowing the forest floor. You follow him quietly, boots crunching on frozen earth as he examines the ground ahead. Footprints tell stories too, he murmurs. Size, gait, weight, even the shape of shoes or moccasins. Historians still argue whether frontiersmen were truly masters of human tracking, or if they exaggerated their abilities in tales. But what you're learning here is practical, and it works. You bend down, brushing snow from a faint trail of prints. They are older than yesterday's deer tracks, but clear enough to study. You start noting stride length, pressure points, and any disturbances in the surrounding debris. Bill pauses and gestures to another set of prints. Notice these are not animal, and notice how they move. A cautious gait, stops and starts. Could be a trader, could be scouts pretending to be traders. You squint at the prints, imagining the person walking here days ago, trying to guess their intentions. It feels strange, almost like piecing together a story without words. Quirky, maybe, but exhilarating. You realize that human movement leaves echoes in the landscape, just as animals do. As you track further, Bill begins to teach the subtle art of frontier diplomacy. Interactions with native tribes like the Blackfeet, Crow, or Shoshone can be life-or-death encounters. Observe first, approach second, and speak last, he says, eyes sharp. He demonstrates careful body language, non-threatening gestures, keeping hands visible, avoiding direct confrontation. It's a delicate balance between confidence and humility. You practice imagining scenarios, trading goods, negotiating safe passage, offering tobacco or beads. These aren't just acts of commerce. They're signals of respect and awareness. Bill adds a quirky historical tidbit. Some trappers once left small, carved tokens at crossing points as a silent message of passage or alliance. Strange, perhaps, but clever. Next, he challenges you to consider how environmental clues indicate human activity. Broken branches, fire pits, discarded bones, even unusual arrangements of stones. Each tells a story. You learn to distinguish between temporary campsites and signs of longer-term occupation. By mid-morning, you begin to anticipate patterns where hunters might converge, which paths are most traveled, and where danger could lurk unseen. Around noon, the sun warms the frost, and Bill introduces another layer: tribal alliances and rivalries. You can survive the wilderness, but ignore human politics, and you'll find yourself in trouble faster than starvation. You study maps and observe boundaries, learning to read subtle markers that signify ownership or respect. Historians still argue about the exactness of these informal territories, but living them, even for a few hours, gives you perspective beyond textbooks. By afternoon, you're practicing footwork, mimicking observed movements, and noting the faint traces left by passing humans. Bill watches silently, only offering occasional corrections. It's as much mental as physical, he says. You have to predict intentions, anticipate responses, and always leave a way to retreat without losing honor or safety. The lesson resonates deeply. Survival isn't just brute strength or endurance. It's foresight, observation, and psychological agility. As dusk approaches, you construct small signals of your own, simple arrangements of sticks to mark safe paths or note potential hazards. It's a quiet, almost meditative task, linking human presence with environmental awareness. You feel a strange satisfaction, understanding that human survival here relies not just on what you carry in your pack, but on how keenly you interpret the world around you. When night falls, you sit by the fire, watching shadows stretch across the half-faced camp. The lessons of the day feel heavy yet enlightening. The frontier is a network of movement, signals, and interactions, both animal and humans. Each footprint, each broken twig, each whispered intention carries information crucial to survival. You lean back, warmed by the fire, and realize that your understanding of the wilderness has deepened. You've begun to see the interplay between nature and humanity, the delicate balance of coexistence, and the silent codes that govern life on this untamed edge of civilization. The morning mist drifts lazily along the riverbanks, curling around boulders and fallen trees like smoke from an unseen fire. Today, Bill shifts focus once again, this time to weather and environmental awareness, subtle skills that can mean the difference between a comfortable night in your lean-to and a life-threatening ordeal. The mountains are beautiful, but they are also unpredictable, and learning to read their signals is a skill that every seasoned frontiersman valued above gold or pelts. Bill points to the clouds overhead. See those cirrus streaks, thin, wispy, high up. They're not just pretty, they tell us the jet of moisture moving in from the west. Historians still argue whether mountain men predicted storms more by intuition or by long observation, but either way, the knowledge saved lives. You nod, squinting, trying to memorize subtle differences in shape, density, and direction. Already, you notice patterns you might have missed just days ago. Low-hanging clouds over ridges often signal rain, while sudden gusts whisper of rapid temperature changes. He gestures to birds in the trees. Watch their flight. Ducks and geese often move before a storm. Swallows hug the ground when wind's about to change. You follow the directions, seeing small, nuanced behaviors you had ignored before. Quirky, almost comical, how a bird's nervous flight could teach you more about survival than any map. But it works, and you find yourself appreciating the forest's subtler language. Bill demonstrates how to read the river itself. He touches the water, noting color, flow, and the shifting currents. Ice chunks, sediment patterns, and small whirlpools all provide clues about upstream conditions. This river tells its own story, he says. If you know how to listen, it warns you before it strikes. You kneel, tracing eddies with your fingers, feeling the temperature difference between currents, and realize that water isn't just for drinking, it's a natural barometer. Later, you move along trails, paying attention to soil moisture, frost depth, and even the scent of wet earth. Bill explains that animals respond to these cues, which in turn affects your hunting and trapping strategy. The interplay of sky, water, and land creates a living system, and survival depends on reading it correctly. Quirky fact: trappers sometimes carried small mirrors or polished metal to reflect sunlight for signaling, which also helped track cloud positions and shadows, an old-school weather predictor. By midday, the wind picks up, rustling the pine needles in a low, persistent murmur. Bill pauses, closing his eyes briefly. Feel it, the direction, the strength. The forest speaks in wind, and if you listen, you won't be surprised. You take a deep breath, letting the cold, pine-scented air fill your lungs, imagining that the trees themselves are silent messengers, relaying information through every rustle and sway. Afternoon brings a practical challenge. Bill instructs you to adjust camp and secure traps in anticipation of changing weather. You reinforce the half-faced camp, relocate pemmican bags, and inspect deadfalls. Each small task is reinforced with the mantra that survival is a combination of preparation, observation, and humility. A careless moment now could result in soaked gear, spoiled food, or lost pelts. By evening, you sit on a ridge overlooking the valley, wind tugging at your hair, the river glinting below. You reflect on the lessons of the day: clouds, birds, rivers, soil, each a silent teacher, offering information if only you take the time to notice. Bill smiles beside you, pipe glowing faintly in the twilight. The wilderness is patient, he says. It won't hurry for you. It rewards observation, patience, and respect. As darkness settles, you feel a quiet sense of mastery forming. The mountains, once alien and unforgiving, are beginning to reveal their logic, their subtle cues. Each gust of wind, each bird's flight, each shifting current is part of a complex network, a code to be interpreted. And in understanding it, you inch closer to becoming not just a survivor, but a participant in this untamed world, attuned to its rhythms and secrets. The morning sun breaks over the peaks in molten gold, painting long shadows across the frosted forest floor. Today, Bill has you preparing for the annual rendezvous, the pivotal social and trading hub of the mountain man world. After months of isolation, this is where knowledge, pelts, and experience converge, a test of your skills, endurance, and diplomacy. You feel a mix of excitement and anxiety. After weeks in the wild, human contact feels both alien and essential. Bill lays out the plan. Rendezvous isn't just a market, it's a survival checkpoint. Historians still argue how organized these gatherings truly were, but for trappers, they were life-or-death affairs. Miss one, and you risk losing trade, supplies, or even alliances. You check your pack, pemmican stacked carefully, dried meat and rendered fat ready, beaver pelts clean and stretched, and tools sharpened and functional. Each item is vital. Mistakes here can be costly. The journey begins with calculated steps along the river trails. You keep close to Bill, noting the marks he leaves, slight deviations to avoid deep snow or unstable ground, and the subtle environmental signs that indicate safe passage. Even with your accumulated skills, the mountains remain unpredictable. You pause frequently, reading water currents, wind direction, and the occasional animal trail that might intersect your path. Along the way, you practice signaling and observation, simple gestures, mirrored movements, and concealed markers, all lessons in silent communication that could save hours or avert confrontation. Quirky, but effective, you think. Small arrangements of sticks or stones could mean the difference between safe passage and walking into danger. Every step is a lesson in foresight, patience, and vigilance. By mid-afternoon, distant smoke rises on the horizon. The rendezvous. The camp is a chaotic blend of tents, bullboats, fire pits, and trading posts, alive with the murmur of voices and animal noises. You pause, taking in the sensory overload, the scent of cooking meat, the glare of sunlight on polished metal, the laughter and bargaining of trappers and Native Americans alike. Your senses, honed by months of isolation, now grapple with this sudden influx of stimuli. Bill guides you through introductions, trading procedures, and negotiation tactics. Beads, tobacco, and small gifts are offered strategically, a delicate dance of respect and practicality. You watch him interact with seasoned trappers, native leaders, and company agents, noticing the nuances of tone gesture, and timing. Quirky historical note. Some trappers carried small carved figurines as luck charms, believed to ensure successful trades and protect from theft, superstitious, but it worked in building rapport. You participate cautiously, learning to gauge value, read intentions, and negotiate confidently. Each interaction reinforces the lessons of patience, observation, and diplomacy. The stakes are high. One misstep can cost valuable pelts or sour relationships that took months to nurture. You begin to understand that survival is not only about mastering the wilderness, but also navigating the complex social networks within it. By evening, after trades are completed and campfires flicker across the valley, you sit with Bill, sharing simple stew over a glowing fire. The forest, mountains, and river are behind you now, replaced by a temporary society of trappers, traders, and native allies. Yet the wilderness skills you honed, tracking, fire making, trap setting, pemmican preparation, environmental reading, all contribute to your confidence here. You feel grounded, capable, and subtly transformed. As darkness envelopes the rendezvous, you reflect on the journey. Months of solitary observation, relentless trial, and patient learning have prepared you for this moment. The frontier has tested your body, sharpened your mind, and attuned your senses. And while the noise and bustle of the rendezvous are overwhelming, you recognize the familiar rhythm beneath it all: survival, adaptation, respect, and careful calculation. You are no longer just a novice trapper. You are a participant in a tradition that blends wilderness skill with human insight. One footstep, one spark, and one careful observation at a time. Night descends slowly over the rendezvous camp, embers glowing in scattered fire pits, smoke curling toward a sky sprinkled with stars. You sit beside Bill, exhausted but alert, reflecting on the months of lessons, failures, and triumphs. Today's trading frenzy has ended, but the real culmination of your journey is in the quiet understanding that survival extends beyond wilderness skills. It's a philosophy, a mindset, a way of life. Bill leans back, pipe in hand, the glow illuminating his weathered face. You've learned more than trapping or fire, more than tracking deer or reading clouds. You've learned the rhythm of this land and the pulse of its people. Historians still argue whether mountain men were heroes or reckless adventurers, but living it, you see it's both and neither. It's just life, stripped to essentials. You nod, feeling the weight of truth in his words. The months of frost, hunger, isolation, and repetitive labor have shaped your body. But more importantly, they've shaped your thinking, patience, and resilience. You glance over your pelts, neatly stacked and ready for trade, and think back to the river crossings, the first flint sparks, and the painstaking preparation of pemmican. Every task, every mistake, every tiny triumph contributed to this moment. You recall your first fire, flickering and fragile, now replaced by the confidence of a blaze you can nurture, sustain, and rely upon. Every skill is connected. Fire fuels food preparation, food fuels hunting, hunting sustains life, and life sustains observation and learning. It's a chain, and every link matters. Conversations drift from campfire to campfire, traders swapping stories, laughter echoing over the river, native hunters discussing territories and strategies. You notice how negotiation mirrors survival, understanding, patience, observation, and respect are essential. You've spent months learning to read these cues in isolation, and now, in the bustling rendezvous, they're amplified, tested, and validated. quirky and almost absurd. You think that tiny tokens, beads, or subtle gestures can carry more weight than brute force. Yet here they dominate the frontier's social ecosystem. As the night deepens, Bill shares his philosophy, a mix of pragmatism, humility, and quiet freedom. The wilderness doesn't care who you are. Civilization can't always protect you. But understanding reality as it is, not as you wish it to be, that's the secret. The mountains reward respect, skill, patience, and observation. You listen, absorbing his words like dry earth soaking rain. Survival isn't a set of tools or tricks. It's a mental and emotional alignment with the natural and human worlds. The camp quiets, and the stars become mirrors of past journeys. Countless mountain men who walked these paths, built these shelters, crossed these rivers, and negotiated these meetings. You feel part of a living continuum, not as a conqueror, but as a participant. The lessons of months crystallize: fire, food, tracking, diplomacy, weather, reading, tools, and endurance are not isolated skills. They are the embodiment of adaptability, resilience, and insight. You lay back on your Lientu's pine bough mattress, listening to the soft murmur of the river and distant laughter. The solitude of the wilderness has shaped your inner rhythm, but the rendezvous has taught connection. The combination of both isolation and interaction, observation and engagement, defines the mountain man's existence. Every skill, every decision, every observation is a thread in a larger tapestry of survival and identity. As you drift toward sleep, warmed by fire and the satisfaction of mastery, you reflect on transformation from a novice, tentative, and unsure to a competent frontiersman, capable of reading the world in layers of subtle signs and signals. You feel a quiet pride. The wilderness has tested you, taught you, and reshaped you. Bill's lessons echo respect, observation, patience, and adaptation. The frontier remains harsh, but you have learned to navigate it with eyes wide open and senses attuned. Word count: 1099. Wind down 300 words now. As the fires dim and the night deepens, take a slow, steady breath. Imagine the cold river winding through the valley, the whisper of pine needles in the wind, the soft crunch of your footsteps on frozen earth. Feel the warmth of your lean-to, the faint glow of embers still alive, and the quiet confidence of knowing that you have navigated months of wilderness with skill and patience. Let the lessons of survival, fire, food, tracking, and human diplomacy settle gently in your mind, each one a reminder of adaptability, resilience, and quiet observation. Picture Bills.com, weathered face beside you, the pipe smoke curling lazily upward as he shares his simple yet profound philosophy. Respect the land, respect its creatures, respect its people, and trust in your own awareness. Let that wisdom wash over you like a gentle river current, carrying away tension and fatigue. Imagine the rhythmic patterns of the forest, the rising and falling of wind across the mountains, and the soft glow of stars overhead. Let the night sky expand above you, vast and infinite, reminding you of the continuity of life and the quiet courage of those who came before you. Now, sink deeper into comfort. Feel the mattress of pine boughs beneath you, the warmth of your fire lingering in the air, and the steady beat of your own heart. You are part of a story larger than yourself, a living thread in a tapestry of skill, endurance, and transformation. Let your mind drift along the rivers, through forests, and into the mountains you have learned to understand. Let sleep arrives slowly, gently, as the final teacher of this long, immersive journey. Tonight, the wilderness holds you safely. The embers whisper their lullaby, and the frontier's rhythm becomes your own. Good night, sweet dreams.